Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between. And at the end of the video, we do talk about the viewer's pick of the week, so in the comments below, let me know your pick of the week for a chance to be featured. Now let's get started. There actually was a pretty hefty haul this week with 14 books, and number 14 for me was Dawn of DC Night Terrors, issue 1. There will be a lot of discussion on the second week of Night Terrors. This is the beginning of the event that I don't know needed to exist. You know, I think there's a fun concept about telling a story within a dream, right? To tell a story that feels dreamlike. And there's certain Night Terrors books that I think does it well. But did I want DC to stall every or most of their books to do a story like this? No, I don't think the event has really pinpointed why they needed to stop every single series to tell this event. I feel like it does feel like it's stalling a bit. And with this issue in particular, there's no big moments for the overall DC universe. There's I believe a Sandman ending. I do not read Sandman, so I can't tell you if that's really affecting those books. But for the most part, it's kind of your run-of-the-mill horror story from DC, which is definitely fine. Like, I'm fine with telling those stories. I love horror, but I just think going all in was a weird move to start this new era of DC when a lot of their books are just up to issue 1s and 2s. So overall, giving that one 2 stars and moving on to number 13. Number 13 for me is Night Terrors Zatanna, issue 1, a book I was actually really looking forward to because one thing, like I mentioned before, stopping these books that have already happened felt weird to me. Like, all right, I'm reading Green Lantern, I'm enjoying Green Lantern, why stop that? But having stories of books that don't exist, I think make a lot of sense for an event like this. Having a story with Zatanna, a character we don't get to see enough, to have that with Robot Man from, I think that's his name, from Doom Patrol, I think is really cool. And if you like these characters a lot, I think you'll enjoy the story. I like Zatanna, but I feel like it does go through old stories we've seen before. There's nothing new, and that's something I will talk a lot about with these Night Terrors books, where it's like, okay, we're dealing with traumas that other stories, in my opinion, have done better. And I feel like this is kind of the same run-of-the-mill. There wasn't anything that tempted me to want to get that next issue. But the artwork was good. I thought that was solid. And again, at least it was 2 different characters we normally don't get to see. So overall, giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 13. Moving on to number 12. I promise not every single Night Terrors book is on the bottom, but number 12 is Night Terrors Robin, issue 1. And again, goes back to kind of more the run-of-the-mill aspect of these books, where I've seen Tim's trauma before, I've seen Jason's trauma, and even when the Batman book was very similar. They're just tackling a lot of stories that I've seen before in a way that's not very different. I thought the artwork could have been stronger for this one, and Jason and Tim don't actually really interact in this issue, where I think that could have been the angle and the hook that could have made this a little different. So overall, giving this 2.5 stars, and that is number 12. Moving on to number 11, which is Ghostlore, issue 3. Honestly, I'm enjoying this book. I won't say it's, my top tier series. I actually don't love the aspect where we get to see the past ghosts in their stories, but I really like this father-daughter relationship and want to see where that goes between this priest and his daughter, and I think that really runs the book very well and makes me intrigued to see, again, where is that gonna go? Every issue, I'm like, I don't know. I'm on the fence if I'm going to get the next issue, but there's something that continues to bring me back. Either it's the haunting atmosphere or the character work, but there is something here that I think has potential. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 11. Moving on to number 10, which is X-Men Days of Futures Past Doomsday, issue 1. I'm a Kitty Pryde fan, so of course I'm going to get this one. And if you're a fan of Days of Futures Past, I think there is a lot of exposition, things that you kind of already know, but I like the different what-if angle they're going with it. The ending with Jean Grey killing people I thought was very interesting. So I was like, okay, that's a different angle. We got to see a little bit from Kitty's kids, which we've seen, I believe, in previous versions of like what if Days of Future Past stories, but it's been a while since I've read those. So I thought that was, cool to see. I like hearing Kitty's voice. Is this something that's reinventing the wheel? No, but I think it did enough different things if you enjoy this world to say, hey, it's cool that we're revisiting it. I don't know if we need to revisit this story because they're tending to do a lot of these revisits, but sure, I think it's not harmful in any way. So it's just kind of there for me. But maybe I'll get the second issue, see where it goes. But I think the cliffhanger is what really did it for me. And again, I like hearing Kitty's voice. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and then it's number 10. Moving on to number 9, which is Night Terror Shazam, issue 1. This one I liked a little bit more because, again, it's focusing on a different angle of the Shazam book. Right now, Shazam just has to do with Billy. We did get another Shazam book with Mary Marvel. This is kind of continuing that a bit more, the previous one. So not the Mark Waid book, even though, yeah, Mark Waid writes this. So it's interesting to see him write Mary. But, I liked it. I think they did the dream sequence better in this issue where it feels like, okay, we're jumping to this moment, we're jumping that moment, kind of like a dream. So I liked that progression. And then I liked just seeing Mary's struggles overall. Again, was there anything that blew me out of the water? No, I do think the previous series with Mary Marvel was stronger from the artwork to the writing, but this one at least feels like it has a little bit more of a purpose to have its own story. The artwork overall, that probably is the thing that didn't make me want to put this higher on my list, just because I do think that could have been stronger. The thing that stood out was probably that double page spread, but other than that, I think facial expressions could have been stronger. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and that might be a 3.5 actually. And no, that was 3, and that's number 9. Moving on to number 8, I think this is one of the better Night Terrors books, and that is Night Terror's Green Lantern issue 1, which I'm shocked by because this is the book I was most upset about having a Night Terrors book, because I'm really enjoying Green Lantern. I want to see where that series goes. And we end on a pretty heavy cliffhanger in the previous issue where we get to see oh my, Carol and Hal are on the plane and there's all these demon space creatures that are around it, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And then you get into Night Terrors and you get a completely different story. But I think because we have Jeremy Adams writing both series, you do get into the root of who Green Lantern is. You again have that dreamlike sequence where you kind of jump into moments very well, and I like the interactions we saw. Is it reinventing the wheel once again? No, I don't know who this book is aimed for, but did I have a fun time reading it? Yeah. Again, I think you get enough character moments in this one where you're like, I've seen this with Hal. It's kind of interesting to see it from a Nightmare point of view. So, and artwork is really strong for this book too, which is why it's higher. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 8, I believe. Yes, that was number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is, you would think it's Captain Marvel because of the cover, but it is Amazing Spider-Man issue 29. With this issue, I'm so torn because there's moments that I'm like, oh, that's really cool that you're tackling that. Spider-Man gets the Dr. Octopus arms. That was interesting. That was cool. And then you get to see Norman Osborn versus Dr. Octopus. And the reason that's interesting, you're kind of fighting these arch nemesis together. I think Dr. Octopus in the last 10 years has become more of an arch nemesis for Peter and has been trying to get that mantle. And then we get to see them both wanting to be redeemed at a certain point. Dr. Octopus being Superior Spider-Man and now Norman Osborn being this Gold Goblin. And I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities in this issue where you're like, oh, these are some interesting character moments for both these characters, and you kind of go mustache twirling with Dr. Octopus where you're like, oh, you missed an opportunity, but then also there's some interesting movements where Dr. Octopus uses the shot to give Norman Osborn that serum, and you're like, oh my god, is he gonna become Green Goblin again? Is he gonna be bad? And then again, you have some interesting visual moments like Spider-Man getting the octopus arms, but then you get characters like Rick Rapp return. I'm like, I don't understand. I don't need this character, at least in my opinion. But the artwork is really good. So there's a lot of conflicting moments of this issue where you're like, it's almost there. It's almost there to be a pretty solid arc, but there's still some things and bumps that they have to go through. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars. I did push it up a little bit because again, the artwork was really good for it. So overall, giving that number 7. So moving on to number 6, which is World's Finest Teen Titans, issue 1. I think this is a good start. It really reminds me a lot of the Young Justice television show. So if you're looking for a fill for that, honestly, I think this is the way to go. And they do it in a more modern spin because, believe it or not, Young Justice was over 10 years ago when that aired. There's definitely a different different view of what teen life is now 10 years later. Kind of take more of a Gen Z approach, which is interesting, without like going too overboard, where I think sometimes when writers not from that generation try to write outside their generation, they try to use lingo that they normally wouldn't use, and it's very weird and out of focus. But with this, I think it was just the right amount where it's like, okay, cool, you're trying to put a modern spin without trying to seem too cool. And I think that works really well here. And just the dynamics of Robin not saying his name and them forming the team from the get-go, the different type of characters we get to see here, it feels a little bit more like the cartoon of Young Justice, and that's a high compliment. So I enjoyed this. I think it was a good start. Definitely build some interesting dynamics here for hopefully a fun series. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars, and then it's number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is Fallen Friend. And this is the ramification aftermath issue of Miss Marvel's death. And the title of this video being, does this redeem her death? And in some ways, yeah, I do think this did a better job than obviously the Amazing Spider-Man story did with Kamala. I feel like that story didn't really have Kamala at the forefront. It was more of a Spider-Man story, and they're like, I guess we'll kill off Kamala. She knows these people, right? And this did a better job of celebrating her because those creators that have worked on her before. We obviously have the creator of Miss Marvel, G. Willow Wilson, doing the beginning of this. Then we have Mark Waid, who's done a lot with the Champions. And then Ahmed, who did the previous Miss Marvel series. And I do think the latter part being the weaker aspect, I think Champions and especially the first story did a really great job at celebrating the character and getting more of the emotional impact of Miss Marvel. And honestly, one of the biggest parts of Miss Marvel's character is her supporting cast being able to be affected, where in that Amazing Spider-Man book, they weren't really involved. And there's definitely a big hint that Miss Marvel is going to be a mutant. There's a lot of X-Men influence in this. We get to see Wolverine show up, and then if you do the QR code, if you get to scan that, you see a kind of end credit situation where Cyclops is like, you don't know what's gonna happen in the future, and there's this like little tease that, yeah, Ms. Marvel's most likely going to be a mutant and most likely going to be affected by the X-Men, and this is why it's happening, because they have to connect it to the movies. And I'm like, all right, that's fine, I guess. Did this issue blow my mind? No, but it does make me feel a little bit better from that previous issue for Spider-Man. I'm glad that this exists, and I'm sure the death is not going to last very long. So overall, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, which is Fishflies issue 1. Honestly, I mean, I love Jeff Lemire's writing. That's not a surprise. And I really love his ambiance. I like his style of art for the stories he's telling. It's very country, I guess is the best way to put it. And I like that vibe. I just feel like he lives in it very well. And I like the pacing for this, where it kind of jumps a lot in this issue, where you get to see these 3 kids just trying to go to a deli and get a popsicle. And they run into this guy who shoots the kid, but it's not very linear. It's not like, oh, the kid died, what's gonna happen? You then jump to another character who's actually our main character and meets up with the killer, and you kind of give this sympathy to this killer, who then becomes this Fishfly. So it's obviously very imaginative, but there's also a lot of grounded elements to it. There's a lot of interesting interpersonal relationships happening, and I think the watercolors really work for this as well. It's just a very unique book, and it definitely grabs you. So overall, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Dark Ride, issue 7. I love this book. I love how it moves. It honestly reminds me a lot of a television show, which I think works really well for this. There's a love for horror movies. There's a love for theme parks, all while this family drama is going on. And you really get to see the heart of the family drama, where you have this dinner happening, and the family and the girl who lost her brother are all sitting at a table kind of shouting at each other. And our main character, I would say, is the son, and he says, hey, I'm done with this. I'm leaving. You suck, Dad. And you also suck to Mom as well. And then his daughter is kind of getting influenced by whatever his mom was possessed by. And you get a little bit more of these secrets unraveling of like, what is the bigger picture behind this theme park and their dad and how's their family connected to it. So I think it moves really well. There's, again, some really good drama. There's some points where the artwork I think could have been a little stronger. There's like a lot of zoomed out panels, but overall I still love the style for this. And I still love the emotion that came from the paneling here. So overall, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 3, I believe. Moving on to number 2, I think you guys are going to be surprised by this one, but it's Night Terrors The Flash, issue 1. This is the first Night Terrors book where I'm like, I get it, you know? What I liked about this is that it kind of told a different story. It's not just the Flash going through his trauma. It's an actual dream. They discuss what it's like to have a dream and compare it to the Speed Force. So with that opening scene, you're like, okay, I'm already kind of, sucked in a little bit. And then you see things are a little weird. They don't feel like real life. Things that show that is that Linda doesn't exist. Kid Flash is young, Wally being young, and there's all these things that don't work. Barry has to figure out why this is happening. So it's a little bit of a mystery. It feels like it's telling a different story that only needs to be told in 2 issues. The artwork is very reminiscent to Francis Manipool, who we've seen a lot of from the New 52 Flash. There's something that really worked with this book that I just feel like the other books didn't succeed at. And mostly, again, all the other stories felt like they were treading old water. This felt like it was telling a new story. So overall, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, if you guys watch this show, you probably already know what it is. It's Second Coming Trinity issue 4. Honestly, this is my favorite book on stands. It never disappoints and always tells a poignant story. And something I love about Second Coming is that you really can pick up any issue and follow it along. It's not a series where you're like, well, you got to read issue 1. You have to read issue 1 of volume 1 to understand what's going on. You literally just need to know that there's a superhero and Jesus Christ is his roommate. And that's pretty much it. And this issue is actually an origin story of Sunstone, I want to say his name is. Sun something. And we get to see that he always believed his parents were murdered through like a car crash, and then he learns he actually killed his parents. And the way we get there was so emotional, and I just love this kind of secret origin story and how this relates to even how Jesus feels about his own dad, and you get the 2 intersecting. But it's really mostly about the superhero story, and you could tell that this creative team loves superheroes, loves what has come before, and wants to tell a different story because of it. And I love when people can reinvent a genre, that, especially in a medium that's been going on forever and ever and ever, and tell a new type of story. And I feel like Second Coming really does that, and I think this issue really does that. So easy pick of the week for me. I give that 4.5 stars. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Let me know in the comments below, what are your favorite comics of the week? And last week's viewer pick of the week was Daredevil. And here are some comments about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.